Hi, this video is about the vocabulary in the poem about animals called A Blessing. So, the words we're going to define are loneliness, blossom, tufts, and slender. We can see that loneliness means the sadness from a lack of friends or company. Blossom are flowers or the time of flowering, where we would say the plants are in blossom. Then tufts means a bunch, cluster, or clump of long, thin materials together, such as threads, grass, or hair, for example. And then slender means gracefully thin. Now let's look at these in some more detail. We can see how loneliness is used in other sentences. For example, it says she felt a deep sense of loneliness and longing for her lost dog. Then we could see maybe it was the fact that he never smiled or the loneliness in those green eyes. Or, finally, isolation, loneliness, and hopelessness can affect older adults who don't leave the house much. So we can see that loneliness has to do with people who don't have friends or other people around to keep them company. Now we can look at the history of the word lonely. Lonely is a shortened form of the word alone. And that word came from a combination of all and one. That is, all by yourself, which was a famous song by a guy named Eric Carmen. Now, loneliness is a feeling. Can you think of other words that describe feelings? Or, in general, other words to describe being alone? We can see words that are related to loneliness. For example, being deserted, desolate, a recluse, lonesome, estranged. That often happens when two people break up, and so a person has an estranged wife, a wife that leaves him alone now. Forsaken, secluded, single, antisocial, or withdrawn. These are all different ways to describe being alone. And sometimes a person is intentionally alone. A person who's antisocial or a recluse is choosing to be alone. So there's different shades of meaning. Next, we can look at the word blossom. It has some word history too. It's rooted in a sound called bell, meaning to shine, flash, or burn white. So blossoms show up. They flash into being. The flowers show up. You can see related words such as blank, blaze, bleach, blind, blonde, blush. All those words have some form of flashing or burning white or shining in one way or another. Now, an interesting thing about the English language is over many years, sometimes B sounds turn into F sounds. So the word flame, flamingo, and flambe are also related to that root word with the B sound. Now let's look at tufts a little bit more. What other words do we use to describe groups of things? We can describe things in clumps, bunches, collections, knots, clusters. You could say you have a tuft of hair, or you could say you have a shock of hair. So this helps us understand the word tufts better. Here's the word tufts used in other sentences. In the scalp, hair grows in tufts of 3 or 4. Then, giant cranes flew heavenwards, steel claws clutching at tufts of clouds. That's a more poetic way of saying it. Here we can see the birds known as cranes. Finally, the soccer pitch looked dry with a few tufts of grass and brown dust showing through. So all these sentences show how tufts can be used to mean clumps or groups of thin little things. Then we have the word slender. Here's the word slender used in other sentences. The baseball team held a slender lead, meaning it was a thin lead. It was not a strong, big lead. Then, my hair was piled high in curls, and a narrow ribbon was tied around my long and slender neck. So this person has a slender or thin and graceful neck. Finally, her tall, slender figure stood like a lonely reed at the riverbank. And so they're comparing this lady to a reed for being thin, but gracefully thin. Now, We can think of other words related to being slender, words that can also mean a combination of attractive, thin, and graceful. So you can see things like slim, narrow, slight, lean, svelte, willowy, delicate, frail, lanky, lithe, skinny, and wispy. So some of them are more positive, but some of them have a more negative feeling associated with them. Calling a person skinny or lanky is more cruel than just saying the compliment of that they're slender. And here we can see a ballerina who would have a combination of some of these words could describe her. Now it's funny how we use words and how they can come to mean different things. In 2009, this creepy idea of Slender Man showed up. He uses slender as part of his name. He's thin, yes, but you wouldn't think of him the same way you'd think of a ballerina. So it's funny how the words can change over time. And that's it. Those are the vocab words. Thanks for watching. Bye.